Police lights flashed against Colonel Amara, Washington's decorated uniform as handcuffs bit into her wrists. "Your badge means nothing here," the officer sneered, reaching the station. They granted her one call. When she hung up, she simply smiled. "Gentlemen, the clock is now ticking on your careers as we dive into this shocking true story of justice and accountability. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment under the law, regardless of their skin color." Now, let's rewind to understand how a decorated military officer found herself in handcuffs and how one phone call would change American policing forever. Colonel Amara Washington stood before her bathroom mirror, meticulously adjusting each medal on her Army dress uniform. At 45, she had earned every decoration through 23 years of exemplary service, 3 combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, 5 years of strategic planning at the Pentagon, a West Point education that had placed her at the top of her class, and now as one of the highest-ranking black women in the entire United States Army. She was weeks away from a historic promotion to brigadier general. The morning sun streamed through the window of her on base housing at Fort Benning, Georgia, where she currently commanded the 198th Infantry Brigade, the first woman and first black officer to hold the position. She straightened her jacket one final time, her reflection showing a face weathered by responsibility but eyes still burning with purpose. "Mom, have you seen my calculus book?" Zora called from downstairs. Amara smiled at the sound of her daughter's voice. Zora was her pride, her reason for pushing through every barrier the military and society had placed before her. "Check under the coffee table," Amara called back, descending the stairs of their modest home. The base housing wasn't luxurious, but she had insisted on living among her soldiers rather than in the more spacious officers' quarters across the base. Leadership by example had always been her philosophy. Zora sat at the kitchen table, textbook now found, dark curls falling across her face as she concentrated on a problem set. She had her mother's determination and her father's mathematical mind. Though Marcus had been gone for 7 years, now killed in a training accident, his legacy lived on in their daughter. "Big meeting today?" Zora asked, glancing up at her mother's formal attire. "Budget presentation to the base commander and visiting Pentagon officials," Amara replied, pouring coffee into her travel mug. "They're evaluating my leadership initiatives before the promotion. Board meets next month." Those initiatives had been controversial among the old guard. Increased focus on addressing sexual harassment in the ranks, new diversity recruitment protocols, mental health support systems that some veteran officers dismissed as coddling, but the results spoke for themselves. Improved readiness scores, higher retention rates, and fewer disciplinary issues. Across her command, the local community's response had been equally mixed. Columbus, Georgia had a complicated relationship with the massive military installation that dominated its economy. Many embraced the diversity the base brought to the southern town, while others resented the changing demographics and progressive military policies. The tension extended to local law enforcement cases Amara had personally followed up on with the Columbus Police Department. The response had been dismissive. "At best, don't forget I'm staying at Janelle's tonight to finish our history project," Zara said, gathering her books. "Her mom said she'd drive me home tomorrow." Amara nodded, checking her watch. "Text me when you get there, and remember curfew still applies." Even at a friend's house, their morning routine completed, Amara dropped Zora at Columbus High School before driving through the main gate of Fort Benning. Soldiers saluted crisply as her car passed, respect evident in their posture. She had earned that respect through consistency and fairness, not by demanding it. The day progressed as planned until 11:23 p.m. when Amara's phone rang. She had been reviewing personnel files in preparation for tomorrow's meeting, still in her full dress uniform. After a formal dinner with the visiting officials had run late, the caller ID showed a Columbus area code she didn't recognize. "Colonel Washington." She answered, military precision in her voice. "Colonel, this is Officer Dalton with the Columbus PD. There's been an incident at a house party on Riverside Drive. We have several minors in custody, including one who claims to be your daughter Amara's." Heart raced, but her voice remained steady. "Is she hurt?" "No, ma'am, but we're processing approximately 20 teenagers for underage drinking and disturbing the peace." Your daughter wasn't drinking, but she was present at an unauthorized gathering. I'll be there immediately. Where exactly? The officer provided an address in an upscale neighborhood near the river, about 15 minutes from base. Amara grabbed her keys, not bothering to change out of her uniform as she drove through the quiet streets of Columbus. Her mind cycled through scenarios. Zora had never been in trouble before. The History Project story now seemed suspicious, but so unlike her responsible daughter. Amara had raised her to make better choices. Had she been working too much, failing to see warning signs, or was this a simple teenage mistake? As Amara turned onto Riverside Drive, the flashing lights of multiple police cruisers illuminated the night. The sprawling homes here belonged to doctors, lawyers, and business executives. This was old money Columbus, where military personnel, regardless of rank, were still considered outsiders. She parked behind the police barricade and stepped out, her polished shoes clicking on the pavement. Several officers turned to look at the black woman in full military dress approaching their scene. She could read their expressions: instantly surprise, confusion, and in some cases immediate dismissal. Her decades of navigating white-dominated spaces had taught her to recognize these reactions. The uniform usually commanded respect, but she had learned long ago that for some her skin color would always speak louder than her rank. As she approached the house, she could see teenagers seated on the front lawn, some in handcuffs, others being questioned by officers. Most were white, she noted, while the few black teenagers were grouped together under closer supervision. Her eyes scanned for Zora, military training kicking in as she assessed the situation. Something about the officers' posture and the separation of teens by race triggered her instincts. This wasn't standard procedure, this was something else entirely. The sprawling colonial home was awash in red and blue lights. As Amara approached the front lawn, two officers stood at the perimeter, one tall and thin with a buzz-cut, the other stocky with a thick mustache and sergeant stripes. Their conversation halted abruptly as she approached. "Excuse me, officers, I'm Colonel Amara, Washington, United States Army. I received a call that my daughter Zora is being detained here." The taller officer, whose name plate read Merck, straightened slightly at her authoritative tone, but the Sergeant Holloway merely gave her a dismissive once-over. "You're going to need to wait with the other parents over there," Holloway said, gesturing toward a group of adults huddled near the garage, most in bathrobes or hastily thrown on clothes. "I understand, but I'd like to confirm my daughter's status first." The officer who called specifically asked me to come to this address. Amara maintained her military bearing, spine straight, voice calm but firm. Sergeant Holloway stepped closer, invading her personal space in a clear intimidation tactic. "Look, lady, I don't care if you borrowed your husband's uniform for Halloween. You need to step back or you'll be joining these kids in the paddy wagon." The slur wasn't subtle, nor was the deliberate disrespect of her rank. Amara had encountered this before. The assumption that a black woman couldn't possibly hold high military rank, that the uniform must be fake or borrowed. "Sergeant Holloway, I understand this is a tense situation, but I am Colonel Amara, Washington, commanding officer of the 198th Infantry Brigade at Fort Benning. Here is my military identification." She reached slowly into her pocket, maintaining eye contact as she produced her official ID. Officer Mercer leaned forward slightly, examining the card with genuine curiosity, but Holloway barely glanced at it. "Could be fake. We get all kinds of fake IDs from these kids. Now step back before I have you removed from my crime scene." From the corner of her eye, Amara noticed several neighbors had emerged from their homes, some openly filming the interaction on their phones. She also spotted Zora among a group of teenagers seated on the grass, her daughter's eyes wide with fear and confusion. She needed to defuse this situation quickly. "Sergeant, I respect that you're doing your job, but I need to check on my daughter. I'm happy to provide any additional identification you require." She reached for her phone to display her official Army profile, but Holloway interpreted the movement as threatening. "Hands where I can see them," he barked, one hand moving to his holster. Several teenagers gasped. "Officer." Mercer stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with his superior's escalation. "Sarge, maybe we should just check her ID more carefully if she is military." Holloway shot his subordinate a warning glare. "You questioning my judgment, Mercer?" The younger officer backed down immediately. "No, sir." Amara recognized the dynamic instantly. A veteran officer with a history of problematic behavior, protected by a system that valued Loyalty over accountability paired with a newer officer still finding his ethical footing, she had seen it in the military too. Many times Officer Mercer, she addressed the younger man directly, could you please verify my identity with the military police at Fort Benning? One call to the base commander's office will confirm who I am. This reasonable request seemed to agitate Holloway further. You don't give orders here, Colonel Halloween. This is my jurisdiction, not your little army playground. The slurs were escalating and Amara noticed more phones recording now. She decided to try another approach, spotting the police captain overseeing the scene from the porch. Perhaps I could speak with your commanding officer. She took a single step toward the house. It was that step that triggered disaster. That's it. Holloway moved with surprising speed, grabbing Amara's arm. Roughly 23 years of combat training kicked in automatically. She didn't strike him, didn't resist, but her body instinctively shifted to break his grip, a defensive movement drilled into every soldier. Holloway primed to see aggression from a black person regardless of circumstance immediately escalated. She's resisting Mercer assist before Amara could speak. Holloway had twisted her arm behind her back, driving her to her knees on the manicured lawn. Mercer hesitated only a fraction of a second before following procedure, moving to secure her other arm. Stop, I am not resisting. Amara kept her voice controlled even as pain shot through her shoulder, knowing that showing any emotion would be used against her. From across the lawn, Zora screamed, "Mom!" trying to run toward her, but held back by another officer. The sound of her daughter's terror cut through Amara deeper than the physical pain. Holloway pressed his knee into her back, forcing her chest against the ground, her medals and ribbons, symbols of her service and sacrifice, grinding into the dirt. You have the right to remain silent, he began reciting loud enough for all the witnesses to hear, making a spectacle of her humiliation. Sergeant, this is a serious mistake, she said, still maintaining her composure though her heart raced. Call Fort Benning immediately. Shut up. Anything you say can and will be used against you. The handcuffs clicked closed around her wrists, cold metal biting into her skin as they roughly pulled her to her feet. Amara caught sight of her reflection in a car window, her immaculate uniform now stained with grass and dirt metals askew, her dignified appearance transformed into that of a criminal. The teenagers watched in shocked silence as the officers marched her toward a patrol car. One of the white parents called out, "Is that really necessary? She's in uniform," but was quickly silenced by Holloway's glare. Officer Mercer seemed increasingly uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact with anyone as he opened the rear door of the cruiser. "Watch your head," he muttered, the routine courtesy at odds with the unjust situation. As Amara was placed in the back seat, she locked eyes with Zora one last time, giving her daughter a small nod meant to convey a message. "Stay calm, I will handle this." The car door slammed shut, sealing her in the cage designed for criminals. Through the window she could see Zora sobbing as another teenager put an arm around her shoulder. Sergeant Holloway leaned into the open front window, smirking. "So, Colonel, how's it feel to be on the other side of authority for once?" Amara met his gaze, steadily refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her anger or fear. "Sergeant, you've made a significant error in judgment today. I suggest you start considering the consequences." Holloway laughed, slapping the roof of the car before walking away. As the cruiser pulled from the curb, Amara took a deep breath, calming her mind as she had before combat operations. This was a different kind of battle, but one she was equally prepared to fight, and unlike Sergeant Holloway, she understood that true power wasn't about immediate dominance or public humiliation. True power was strategic, patient, and transformative. As the neighborhood receded behind them, Amara began mentally composing what she would say when she got her one phone call. Someone very specific would be receiving it, and the ripple effects would extend far beyond this small-minded sergeant's comprehension. The patrol car wound through the darkened streets of Columbus, each passing streetlight briefly illuminating Colonel Amara. Washington's reflection in the window dirt smudged her right cheek. Her immaculately pressed uniform jacket was now wrinkled and stained, the gleaming metals that represented her courage under enemy fire in Afghanistan now faced the indignity of being pressed painfully against her restrained body in the front seat. Sergeant Holloway was recounting his version of events to Officer Mercer, embellishing with each sentence. "Did you see how she tried to swing at me? These people always think the rules don't apply to them, though. These people hung in the air, its meaning unmistakable. Amara closed her eyes, retreating into memory as a coping mechanism she'd developed over decades of facing discrimination. She was 9 years old again, sitting in her father's car as he was pulled over for the third time that month, watching him transform from Army Captain Robert Washington into a performance of unthreatening difference. Yes, sir, no, sir, whatever you say, sir, all while wearing the uniform he'd worn at Desert Storm. Daddy, why do they keep stopping us? She had asked. Afterward, his answer had shaped her life. Because some people will never see past our skin, Amara. That's why you have to be twice as good, twice as disciplined, twice as unimpeachable. Not fair, but that's the battlefield we fight on. She had joined the army to continue his legacy, but also to prove something, that excellence could overcome prejudice, that systems could be changed from within. No handcuffed in the back of a police cruiser, the weight of that naive belief crashed down upon her. Excellence hadn't protected her. The uniform hadn't protected her. Nothing had changed. Hey, Colonel Holloway's voice yanked her back to the present. You got awful quiet back there, thinking about what your commanding officer's going to say when he finds out his diversity hire got arrested. Amara maintained her silence, knowing any response would only feed his satisfaction. She instead focused on Mercer, the younger officer who seemed increasingly uncomfortable with his partner's behavior. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, eyes fixed on the road, deliberately avoiding the rear-view mirror. He was weak, but not necessarily malicious, a follower who might break under pressure. She filed that observation away for later use. The cruiser pulled into the police station parking lot, where several other officers stood smoking near the entrance. Their conversation halted as they spotted a woman in full military dress uniform in the back seat. One officer's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Holloway emerged from the car with a theatrical flourish, playing to his audience. Got a real live colonel here, boys. Thinks her uniform puts her above the law. He yanked open the rear door. Out you go. General Patton, the handcuffs restricted Amara's movement, making it difficult to exit the vehicle with any dignity. She had to awkwardly shuffle sideways, nearly stumbling as her foot caught on the doorframe. Holloway made no move to assist her, instead watching with obvious pleasure as she struggled. The small group of officers observed with expressions ranging from amusement to confusion to concern. One older officer with sergeant stripes stepped forward, slightly, his brow furrowed. What's the charge? Holloway, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, assaulting an officer. Holloway rattled off, grabbing Amara's upper arm to march her toward the entrance. The older sergeant's eyes narrowed as he took in Amara's rank insignia. That's full Colonel's Eagles. She active duty claims to be probably borrowed the uniform from the costume shop. The automatic doors slid open and Amara was paraded through the station lobby like a trophy desk. Officers looked up from their paperwork conversations, paused mid-sentence. A civilian clerk gasped audibly. The public humiliation was calculated. Amara knew it was about power, about putting her in her place. The booking process began with deliberate slowness. Remove all jewelry and accessories. The booking officer instructed, avoiding eye contact. Holloway stood watching, arms crossed. That includes those little decorations, Colonel. The medals, each one had been earned through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. The Bronze Star from when her unit had come under heavy fire near Kandahar, the Meritorious Service Medal for her work restructuring combat medical evacuations, saving countless lives. The achievement medals representing years of exceptional service. Now she was being forced to remove them like they were costume jewelry, with handcuffs temporarily removed, but Holloway watching for any sudden moves. Amara carefully unpinned each medal, placing them in the plastic property bin. Next came fingerprinting, her fingers pressed into ink and then onto cards, creating a permanent criminal record where none had existed before then. The mug shot stand on the line. Hold this, the photographer said, handing her a placard with booking information. Look at the camera. Flash her military ID. Photo showed a proud officer in perfect uniform. This photo would show a disheveled woman with dirt on her face. The visual narrative of criminality now attached to her name in databases across the country. As she was led toward the holding cells, a desk sergeant different from the one outside approached. Holloway, can I have a word? He asked quietly, gesturing toward a corner. They spoke in hushed tones, the desk sergeant repeatedly glancing at Amara with concern. More officers had gathered, some openly questioning the situation. Is that really a full bird, Colonel? What the hell happened? Holloway arrested a uniformed Officer, the station captain emerged from his office. Immediately noticing the commotion, what's going on here? Holloway straightened, always performing for authority, arrested a perp for assaulting an officer at that house party. Calls her. She claims to be military. The captain approached Amara, studying her uniform and rank. You're a full colonel. Colonel Amara Washington, commanding officer 198th Infantry Brigade, Fort Benning, she replied calmly. My military ID was confiscated during booking. The captain's expression shifted subtly. Unlike Holloway, he recognized the potential repercussions of mishandling an active duty senior officer. Get her ID, he ordered a nearby officer when it was brought to him. He examined it carefully, then looked back at Amara with new weariness. Take her to interview room 3 instead of the holding cell, he instructed, and removed the cuffs. Holloway began to protest, but the captain cut him off with a sharp gesture as Amara was led to the interview room. The desk sergeant, who had approached Holloway earlier, fell into step beside her. Once you're in the room, you'll be offered your phone call, he said quietly. Use it wisely. The interview room was small and stark. 1 table, 2 chairs. A one-way observation window. The handcuffs were removed, leaving red marks on Amara's wrists. The door closed, leaving her alone temporarily. She used the moment to straighten her uniform as best she could, a small act of reclaiming her dignity. 5 minutes later, the door opened. The captain entered with Officer Mercer, who carried a telephone. You're entitled to 1 phone call, the captain said, his tone now professionally neutral. We're still processing the charges. Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and assaulting Officer Holloway. Amara met his gaze directly. Those charges are fabricated, as I believe your Officer Mercer knows. Mercer's eyes flickered downward, unable to maintain contact. Your call, Colonel, the captain prompted, ignoring her statement. Amara reached for the phone, her expression betraying nothing of the strategic calculation happening behind her eyes. How would you have handled this situation if you were in Colonel Washington's position? Have you ever witnessed or experienced an abuse of power? Comment number 1. If you believe the officer's treatment of Colonel Washington was motivated by racial bias. Comment number 2. If you think the colonel's military rank should have protected her from this treatment. Like and subscribe if you're as invested as I am in seeing how justice unfolds in this shocking case. Now, with Colonel Washington about to make the most important phone call of her life, ask yourself, who would you call if you were in her position, and what will happen when the full weight of military authority comes crashing down on a small-town police department? Stay tuned as we continue this extraordinary story of courage, discrimination, and the fight for accountability. The phone felt heavy in Colonel Amara Washington's hand. As she considered her options, she could call the base commander at Fort Benning, who would certainly intervene. She could call the military police, who would establish jurisdiction over her case as an active duty officer. She could call any number of high-ranking officers who respected her work and would be outraged by her treatment. But Amara was thinking beyond her immediate situation. This wasn't just about her wrongful arrest. This was about a pattern of behavior that affected countless others who lacked her resources and position. This required a strategic response, not just a tactical one. Her mind traveled back 6 months to a Joint Chiefs of Staff conference in Washington, D.C. She had been invited to present her successful leadership initiatives at Fort Benning, programs that had since been implemented at bases across the country. After her presentation, she had been approached by General Marcus Richardson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the highest-ranking military officer in the United States. Richardson, a towering figure with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for quiet intensity, had invited her to join him for coffee in his private office. Your work is exceptional, Colonel Washington, he had said, studying her with keen intelligence, but I suspect it hasn't been easy. Amara had maintained her professional demeanor. Every leadership position comes with challenges, sir. I'm not talking about standard leadership challenges. His voice had lowered. I came up through the ranks in the 70s and 80s, first black man to command special operations. Command, I know what it's like to be exceptional and still face barriers that have nothing to do with your abilities. It was the first time a superior officer of his stature had so directly acknowledged the racial dynamics she navigated daily. The conversation had shifted to their shared experiences, the progress made in the distance still to travel, both within the military and in civilian society. The uniform doesn't shield us completely, Richardson had said, but it does give us a platform, a responsibility to ensure the systems we serve treat everyone with dignity. As she was leaving, he had handed her a business card with a personal number handwritten on the back. This bypasses all the gatekeepers. If you ever encounter a situation where the uniform isn't being respected, call me directly, day or night. Now sitting in a police station interview room with her uniform soiled and her dignity assaulted, Amara dialed that number from memory. The call was answered on the second ring. Richardson. The voice was alert despite the late hour. General Richardson, this is Colonel Amara. Washington 198th Infantry Brigade. She kept her voice steady. Professional. Colonel Washington, it's nearly 1 o'clock a.m. on the East Coast. What's the situation? No pleasantries, no questions about why she was calling his private line. Just immediate focus on the matter at hand. Sir, I've been wrongfully arrested by the Columbus Police Department while in full uniform. After attempting to locate my daughter at a house party, I identified myself as an active duty officer. My military ID was dismissed as fake. I'm currently being processed on fabricated charges of disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and assaulting an officer. Her report was concise, factual, delivered with military precision. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then, are you injured? No, sir. Are you currently restrained? Not at this moment, sir. I'm being permitted. My phone call. Another pause. Brief, for this time, hold the line, Colonel. Do not say another word to anyone. The line didn't go dead. She could hear movement voices as Richardson apparently moved through his home, the sound of a door closing, then the distinctive sound of multiple phones being operated simultaneously. The captain and Officer Mercer, who had remained in the room, exchanged increasingly uncomfortable glances as the call continued well beyond the typical length of a defendant's phone call. Amara maintained her composed expression, though internally she knew gears were now turning that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of this night. After approximately 3 minutes, Richardson's voice returned. Colonel Washington, I want you to listen carefully. Several things are about to happen. First, the governor of Georgia has been contacted and is calling the Columbus Police Department as we speak. Second, the Department of Defense Office of General Counsel has been notified and is dispatching representatives to Columbus immediately. Third, I have personally spoken with General Hamilton at Fort Benning, who is sending military police to secure your release. As if on cue, the station phone began ringing in the distance. The captain's radio crackled to life. Captain Reeves to the front desk. Urgent call. He hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and curiosity about Amara's unusually long call. Fourth, Richardson continued, I want you to know that this incident will be addressed at the highest levels. The unlawful detention of a senior military officer in uniform is not something the United States Armed Forces takes lightly. His voice carried the weight of his authority. Is there anything else I should know about the situation? My daughter Zora is still at the scene of the party. She's 17 and was not involved in any wrongdoing. I'm concerned about her treatment in my absence. Understood. That will be addressed as well. The station door burst open somewhere down the hall. Raised voices became audible, including one mentioning governor and immediate release. The captain's radio crackled again, more urgently. This time, Sir, Amara said, I believe action is already being taken. Thank you for your intervention. Stay where you are. Colonel, do not sign anything or make any statements. I'll remain on the line until military representatives arrive. The interview room door swung open. The police chief himself stood there, a man Amara recognized from community events but had never formally met. His face was ashen. Colonel Washington, he asked, his voice strained. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. I've just spoken with the governor's office. And he trailed off as he noticed the phone still in her hand. Who is she speaking with? He asked the captain. I believe it's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, sir, the captain replied quietly. The chief's face went from ashen to ghostly. The chairman of why wasn't I informed immediately that we had a senior military officer in custody? The captain had no answer. Officer Mercer stared at the floor, visibly distressed. From the hallway behind them, Sergeant Holloway's voice could be heard protesting loudly. This is my arrest. You can't just override my authority because some general made a phone call. The chief closed his eyes briefly in what appeared to be physical pain at Holloway's words. Carrying to the interview room, Colonel Washington, he said, his tone now deferential. On behalf of the Columbus Police Department, I want to extend my sincerest apologies for this incident. All charges are being dropped immediately. Your personal effects will be returned and will provide transportation wherever you need to go. Amara kept the phone to her ear. General Richardson, the police chief, is here and has indicated all charges are being dropped. Good. Richardson replied, audible to everyone in the now silent room. Chief, this is General Marcus Richardson, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I expect your full cooperation with the military personnel en route to your station and with the subsequent investigation into this incident. Is that understood? The chief straightened instinctively at the authoritative voice. Yes, General, absolutely, Colonel. Washington will remain on the line with me until military representatives arrive. Please leave the room now. The dismissal was clear. The chief nodded, gesturing for the captain and Mercer to follow him out. As the door closed behind them, Amara could hear the chief immediately dressing down his officers in harsh whispers. Alone again, Amara finally allowed herself a moment of relief, though her posture remained perfect. Thank you, General Richardson. No thanks necessary, Colonel. This is about more than one incident. This is about ensuring the uniform is respected regardless of who wears it. They spoke for another 10 minutes until the military police arrived, led by the Fort Benning Provost Marshal himself. As promised, Richardson stayed on the line the entire time. When Amara finally hung up, she was surrounded by military personnel. Her property was being returned, and Sergeant Holloway was being bared by the police chief in full view of everyone. From her position in the interview room, Amara could see through the open door. As Holloway and Mercer were called into the chief's office, their faces registering the dawning realization that their careers had just imploded spectacularly. Outside the station, a news van had already arrived, its satellite dish extending skyward. Word traveled fast in Columbus as the military police escorted her toward the exit. Amara maintained her dignified bearing, refusing to show any emotion despite the roller coaster of the past few hours. This was just the beginning. The phone call had set events in motion that would ripple far beyond this police station, this city, or even this night. What none of them realized yet was that in making that call, Colonel Amara Washington had not just secured her own release, she had ignited a transformation of the system itself. Red and blue emergency lights reflected off rain's slick pavement as Colonel Amara Washington emerged from the Columbus police station, flanked by military police officers. The scene had transformed dramatically. In the hours since her phone call to General Richardson, where there had been a nearly empty parking lot, there were now multiple vehicles. Military police cruisers, a black SUV with government plates, 2 local news vans with reporters preparing for live broadcasts, and a growing crowd of onlookers drawn by the unusual activity. The police chief himself held the door for Amara, a stark reversal from the treatment she had received hours earlier. His face was locked in a grimace of professional concern, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. This incident had escalated beyond anything he could have anticipated, reaching the highest levels of military command and state government. In a matter of minutes, cameras flashed as Amara stepped onto the sidewalk, her uniform still disheveled but her bearing impeccable. Several reporters surged forward, microphones extended. Colonel Washington, can you comment on your wrongful arrest? Colonel, is it true the chairman of the Joint Chiefs intervened personally? Are you planning to sue the department? Amara maintained her composed expression, neither acknowledging the questions nor showing any reaction to the attention. The military police lieutenant beside her stepped forward. Colonel Washington will not be making any statements at this time. Please direct all inquiries to the Fort Benning Public Affairs Office. A black sedan pulled to the curb, and from it emerged Lieutenant Colonel James Reynolds, the Fort Benning Judge Advocate General's senior legal counsel. He approached Amara with a crisp salute. Colonel Washington, we have your daughter secure a military escort. Brought her to the base visitor center about 20 minutes ago. She's safe and unharmed. Relief washed through Amara, though only those who knew her well would have detected the subtle softening around her eyes. Thank you, Colonel Reynolds. I'd like to see her immediately, of course. Ma'am, I'll drive you personally. As they walked toward the sedan, Reynolds lowered his voice. General Hamilton is waiting at the base. The chairman has briefed him directly. Amara nodded, understanding the significance. General Hamilton was the base commander, and direct communication from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs would have put the entire installation on high alert. The drive to Fort Benning was conducted in near silence, both officers understanding that the walls of a car were not secure enough for the conversation that needed to happen as they passed through the main gate. The guard saluted with extra sharpness, word having clearly spread about the incident. The visitor center was normally closed at this hour, but lights blazed from every window as soon as the car stopped. Amara was out the door, maintaining her dignified pace, though. Every maternal instinct urged her to run inside. Zora sat with a female military police officer, her eyes red from crying the moment she saw her mother. She launched herself forward. Mom, for the first time that night, Amara's military bearing gave way to her humanity as she wrapped her arms around her daughter. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" she asked, holding Zora at arm's length to examine her. "I'm fine, just scared," Zora said, her voice quavering. "They wouldn't tell me anything after they took you away. Then Mrs. Henderson showed up. She saw it all from her window and stayed with me until the military people came." Amara made a mental note to thank this neighbor, then turned to the MP officer. "Thank you for looking after my daughter, Lieutenant." "My honor, Colonel," the young woman replied with genuine respect. "General Hamilton is waiting in the commander's office. Whenever you're ready, ma'am." Amara turned back to Zora. "I need to meet with the general. Lieutenant Reynolds will take you home, and I'll be there as soon as I can." Zora nodded, fatigue evident in her posture. "What's going to happen to those officers?" "Mom, that remains to be determined," Amara replied, her tone making it clear that consequences would indeed be forthcoming. The drive to headquarters was equally silent but charged with different energy. When Amara entered the commander's office, General Hamilton rose immediately from behind his desk. "Colonel Washington," he said, genuine concern in his voice, "are you all right?" "I'm fine physically, sir. I've spoken with General Richardson. To say he's furious would be an understatement. The Secretary of Defense has been briefed as well." Hamilton gestured to the chairs. "Please sit. We have some decisions to make." Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. A captain entered, followed by 3 civilians in suits. "Despite the late hour, the Pentagon representatives have arrived, sir." What followed was a strategy session unlike any Amara had experienced before. The military's response was being coordinated at the highest levels, with clear recognition that this incident transcended one officer's mistreatment. It was about the relationship between civilian authorities and military personnel, about racial profiling, about abuse of power. By the time Amara finally returned home at 4:37 a.m., escorted by military police who would remain stationed outside her residence, plans were well underway. Her house lights were unsurprising her until she entered to find it occupied, not just by Zora, now asleep on the couch, but by a full military response team: a public affairs officer, a JAG Corps major, a Pentagon liaison, 2 administrative staff setting up secure communications in her dining room. "We've established a command post here for the immediate future, Colonel," the JAG officer explained. "General Richardson's orders. We anticipate significant media interest by morning, and we need to coordinate the military's response." Amara nodded, the surreal nature of the situation finally beginning to penetrate her professional armor. Less than 6 hours ago, she had been handcuffed in the back of a police car, her authority dismissed, her dignity assaulted. Now the full machinery of the United States military was mobilizing around her case as the teams briefed her on their initial actions. Amara's phone began lighting up with notifications. The videos taken by neighbors had already gone viral, shared thousands of times across social media platforms. #Colonel Washington was trending nationally. News organizations were running breaking stories about a decorated black female Army colonel arrested, while in uniform commenters were divided along predictable lines, many expressing outrage at her treatment, others defending the police and questioning her version of events. "You should get some rest, Colonel," the public affairs officer suggested, noting Amara's exhaustion. "Well, have a full media strategy prepared by 0800. Amara thanked them, but didn't immediately head to her bedroom. Instead, she went to the couch where Zora slept, gently covering her with a throw blanket. Then she stepped onto her back porch, needing a moment alone to process the night's events. The sky was beginning to lighten with pre-dawn glow in the distance. She could hear Fort Benning coming alive with morning PT formations. Her phone vibrated with a text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Colonel Washington, this is Janelle's mother, Elaine Henderson. I witnessed everything tonight. I have video footage and am willing to testify about what I saw. Those officers were completely out of line. Please let me know how I can help." It was the first of what would become hundreds of messages of support, evidence offers, and media requests. Another text arrived, this one from General Richardson himself. "Colonel, press conference at Pentagon 1400. Our Def will address your situation personally. This will not be swept under the rug. Amara took a deep breath of the Georgia morning air, feeling the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just about her anymore. It had become something much larger, a potential inflection point in the ongoing struggle for equal justice. Her wrongful arrest might become a catalyst for change. But that change would come at a cost. There would be backlash. There would be those who would try to discredit her, to minimize what had happened, to protect the system that had failed her, her military career, her privacy, her family's peace. All would be affected by what was unfolding. As she stood on her porch watching the sun begin to rise, Amara made a decision. She would not allow this incident to be about one colonel's bad night. She would use her position, her voice, and the platform this incident had thrust upon her to address the systemic issues at its core. She would transform this personal humiliation into meaningful change with renewed resolve. She returned inside to find the military lawyers waiting with preliminary papers. Have you made a decision about pursuing legal action? Colonel, the JAG major asked. Yes, Samar replied, her voice steady with purpose. We're going to ensure this never happens to anyone else in uniform or outdraft the complaints, all of them. Department of Justice, civil rights investigation, formal charges against the officers, civil suit against the department. We're going to use every legal tool available. The officers exchanged glances, both impressed and concerned by her comprehensive approach that will create significant waves. Colonel One cautioned, it may affect your promotion board next month. Amara met his gaze directly. If addressing injustice cost me a star, then I never deserved it in the first place. She glanced at the secure phone the Pentagon team had installed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need 5 minutes alone before we continue. In her bedroom door locked, Amara Washington finally allowed herself what she had denied in the police car, in the station, and throughout the military response. 5 minutes of pure, unfiltered emotional release. 5 minutes to feel the rage, the humiliation, the fear for her daughter, the shock of having her identity and authority so completely dismissed. 5 minutes to be not Colonel Washington, but simply Amara, a black woman who had experienced what countless others faced without her resources and platform. When those 5 minutes ended, she washed her face, straightened her still soiled uniform, and returned to the dining room where the military response team awaited her direction. The transformation from victim to catalyst was complete. The next phase was about to begin. 1 week after Colonel Amara Washington's arrest, the small conference room at the Columbus Police Department's Internal Affairs Division was filled beyond capacity. 2 internal affairs investigators sat behind a table covered with documents, laptops, and recording equipment. Across from them sat Amara in her service uniform, flanked by both military legal counsel and a prominent civil rights attorney behind them. Representatives from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division observed silently, their presence a clear message about federal interest in the case. For the record, began Captain Tanya Rodriguez, lead internal affairs investigator. This is the formal interview of Colonel Amara Washington regarding the incident on June 17th. Colonel, please state your full name and position for the recording. Colonel Amara Elise Washington, commanding officer, 198th Infantry Brigade, Fort Benning, Georgia. Amara's voice was clear and steady, betraying none of the tension that filled the room. For the next 3 hours, she provided a detailed chronological account of the events, answering questions with military precision. She described Sergeant Holloway's dismissal of her identification, his escalating aggression, the excessive force used in her arrest, and the degrading treatment at the station. As she spoke, Captain Rodriguez occasionally referenced video footage on her laptop, not just from police body cameras, but from multiple civilian witnesses who had recorded the incident from different angles. The neighborhood had turned out to be filled with home security cameras, doorbell cameras, and smartphone wielding residents. What emerged was an unassailable visual record that confirmed every element of Amara's account. At timestamp 2347, Rodriguez noted, Sergeant Holloway can be clearly heard saying, and I quote, "I don't care if you borrowed your husband's uniform for Halloween. Would you characterize this as a dismissal of your identity based on gender?" It was a dismissal based on both gender and race. Amara replied evenly. The sergeant made multiple comments suggesting a black woman could not possibly hold the rank displayed on my uniform in another part of the station. Officer Derek Mercer sat in a similar room facing his own questioning. Unlike his superior, Mercer had no union representative present, having declined their services in a move that had raised eyebrows throughout the department. According to sources who later spoke to reporters, Mercer had provided investigators with a written statement that largely corroborated Amara's version of events, including Holloway's history of making racially charged comments about suspects by mid-afternoon. Both officers had been officially placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Their police powers were suspended, badges and service weapons confiscated for Holloway. It was the first significant discipline in a 17-year career, despite 17 previous civilian complaints, 11 from black citizens alleging racial profiling or excessive force, all dismissed without action. For Mercer, a 4-year veteran with 3 prior complaints, it represented a potential end to a career that had barely begun. The news of their suspension broke during the evening broadcasts, accompanied by the public release of selected body camera footage. The videos spread across social media with stunning speed, generating millions of views. Within hours, the images were undeniable: a composed black woman in full military dress uniform displaying her ID being thrown to the ground by white officers who ignored her rank and station. National news organizations picked up the story. Immediately, decorated colonel arrested while in uniform led broadcasts across the country. Military veterans groups issued statements of outraged civil rights. Organizations pointed to the incident as emblematic of broader issues in policing. Columbus became the unwilling epicenter of yet another national conversation about race, authority, and justice at Fort Benning. Amara's office had been transformed into a combination legal headquarters and media response center. Interview requests poured in from every major network and publication: CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, The New York Times, The Washington Post, all seeking exclusive sit-downs with the colonel at the center of the growing storm. Thus far, on advice from both military and civilian counsel, she had declined all requests. Strategic silence is powerful, her civil rights attorney had advised. Let the videos speak for themselves. Let the public demand answers from the police, not explanations from you. That strategy appeared to be working in the information vacuum. The clear visual evidence drove the narrative. The Columbus Police Department's initial statement, a generic mention of investigating the circumstances, had been overwhelmed by the court of public opinion. The mayor had scheduled an emergency press conference for the following morning. Meanwhile, Amara was navigating multiple parallel investigations. The police internal affairs probe, the Department of Justice civil rights investigation, the military's own review of the incident and its implications for service members. Each required detailed statements, documentation, and time, all while she maintained her command responsibilities at Fort Benning. Colonel Washington, her J.K. Corps attorney, said during a brief break between meetings, "The civil lawsuit is prepared for filing whenever you give the word. We've documented potential damages exceeding $2 million based on similar precedents." Amara nodded, reviewing the thick legal document. The lawsuit named not just Holloway and Mercer, but the police chief, the department, and the city of Columbus as defendants. It alleged civil rights violations, false arrest, excessive force, and emotional distress. It would be a nuclear option guaranteed to generate years of legal battles and media attention. "Hold on filing for now," she instructed. "I want to see how the department responds to the investigations first." Later that evening, as Amara finally returned home, she found Zora at the dining room table, surrounded by textbooks, attempting normally despite the chaos that had engulfed their lives. "How was school?" Amara asked, setting down her briefcase. Zora shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "Fine?" The tone suggested otherwise. "Zora, what happened?" After a moment of silence, Zora closed her calculus book. "Mr. Dennis said some stuff about you in class today, about how you're just trying to get famous and make money by suing the police." The words hit Amara like physical blows. Mr. Dennison was Zora's AP physics teacher, a man who had previously praised her daughter's academic performance. He said that not directly, he was talking to another teacher before class, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Then during the lesson, he kept making comments about people who play the race card. Whenever they get in trouble, tears welled in Zora's eyes. Half the class was nodding along with him. Mom, Amara sat beside her daughter, taking her hand. "I'm so sorry. You're caught in the middle of this." "I'm not sorry," Zora said fiercely, wiping her eyes. "I'm proud of you." I'm just angry that people who weren't even there think they know what happened. The doorbell rang. Before Amara could respond, outside stood Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds from JAG Corps, his express. Sighing grim, sorry to disturb you at home, Colonel, but we've received some concerning information inside. He placed a folder on the coffee table. The police union has hired Sentinel Strategic Communications, APR firm specializing in defender law enforcement. In high-profile cases, they've begun opposition research on you. Opposition research, Zora asked. It means they're digging into Mom's past, looking for anything they can use against her, Amara explained, scanning the documents. Reynolds had brought every case I've handled, every deployment, every performance review. They're requesting it all through legal channels. They're also pursuing less formal avenues. Reynolds added carefully, we've received reports of individuals asking questions about you around the base and in the neighborhood, as if to underscore his point. Amara's phone chimed with a security alert. The camera she had installed after the arrest showed an unmarked sedan driving slowly past their house for the third time that evening. The atmosphere had changed. What had begun as a clear-cut case of wrongful arrest was evolving into something more complex and potentially dangerous. Forces were mobilizing on both sides of an expanding conflict that had her at its center as Reynolds departed with promises of increased security measures. Amara stood at her living room window, watching the unmarked car make another pass. The stakes were escalating rapidly. Her career, her reputation, her family's safety, all were now in play, yet she felt no regret for making that phone call from the police station, for refusing to let the incident be quietly resolved with apologies and handshakes. Some battles needed to be fought in the open, where the light could reach the darkest corners of broken systems. The question now was how far those systems would go to protect themselves, and how much she was willing to risk to see this through to its conclusion. Have you ever witnessed institutions closing ranks to protect themselves when challenged? Comment number 1. If you believe Colonel Washington is right to pursue full accountability despite the growing personal cost. Comment number 2. If you think the escalating situation puts too much at risk for her family. This story raises important questions about what price we're willing to pay for justice and how power responds when threatened. Like and subscribe if you want to see more stories that expose uncomfortable truths about our systems. What would you do if you were in Colonel Washington's position, with your career and family now caught in the crossfire of a national controversy as the investigation intensifies and opposition mounts? Colonel Washington will face even greater challenges that will test her resolve and reveal just how deep the problems in the Columbus Police Department truly run. 3 weeks after her arrest, Colonel Amara Washington sat in her office reviewing security footage from her home. The same unmarked sedan had passed by 7 times the previous night, slowing noticeably each time. Military police now patrolled her street regularly, but the surveillance continued with increasing boldness. She closed the laptop as her assistant knocked on the open door. Colonel General Hamilton would like to see you in his office at 1:400 hours. Amara checked her watch. The meeting was in 20 minutes, and the base commander rarely requested same-day appointments. Did he mention the subject? No, ma'am, but he asked that you come alone. That detail sent a ripple of concern through her. Typically, senior officers brought aides or relevant staff to command meetings. A request to come alone suggested something sensitive or potentially problematic. As she walked across the base to headquarters, Amara noticed sideways glances from several officers she had previously worked with comfortably. The incident had created invisible fault lines throughout the military community, with some rallying to her support while others quietly questioned whether she was damaging the Army's relationship with local authorities. The divisions had grown sharper since yesterday's development. A coordinated media campaign to question her account and character had begun, with a press release from the police union describing Sergeant Holloway as a decorated officer with an unblemished record who was being railroaded by political correctness. By afternoon, several conservative news outlets were running segments asking whether Colonel Washington had manufactured a racial incident for personal gain. A website had appeared overnight, truthwashington.com, featuring carefully selected and edited portions of her military record, highlighting a disciplinary note from 15 years earlier when she had disputed a superior's order during a training Exercise. The site neglected to mention that her position had later been vindicated and the note removed from her permanent record. Most disturbingly, the local newspaper had run a front-page story featuring quotes from an anonymous former colleague who described Amara as aggressive and quick to claim discrimination. When challenged, the coordinated nature of the attacks made clear that significant resources were being deployed against her. Colonel Washington General Hamilton greeted her as she entered his office, his expression unreadable. "Please have a seat." He waited until his assistant closed the door before continuing. "I've received a call from the Pentagon that concerns your promotion board." Amara's heart sank, though her face remained impassive. The Brigadier General promotion had been virtually assured before the incident. Her record was exemplary, her leadership initiative successful, her combat experience extensive. The Secretary of the Army has suggested delaying your board appearance until this situation with the Columbus Police Department is resolved. Hamilton's careful wording made clear this wasn't truly a suggestion. "I see." Amara replied, keeping her voice neutral. "Did the Secretary provide a rationale officially?" "The concern is that the ongoing media attention could unfairly influence the board in either direction." Hamilton leaned forward slightly unofficially. "There are those in Washington who feel your pursuit of this matter has become overzealous. The civil lawsuit in particular has raised eyebrows." "I haven't filed the lawsuit yet." Amara pointed out the preparation of it became public knowledge. Hamilton countered, "As did your meetings with the Department of Justice. Some feel you're escalating rather than resolving with respect. General, what happened to me is part of a pattern affecting service members of color throughout the country. Resolving my individual case wouldn't address the underlying issues." Hamilton sighed, rubbing his temples. "Amara, I'm on your side here. What happened to you was inexcusable, but you need to understand the political realities. The police have powerful unions and political allies. There are senators calling the Secretary of Defense about this. Your promotion could become collateral damage." The subtext was clear. "Back off, accept a settlement, let the system handle it quietly." The path of least resistance, the path that would protect her career but leave the deeper problems unrest. "I understand the realities, Sir," Amara replied, "and I accept whatever consequences come from pursuing this matter appropriately." She didn't add what both of them knew, that General Richardson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, had personally invested in this case. Hamilton's phone rang, interrupting the tense moment. "Excuse me, I need to take this," while he spoke in hushed tones. Amara's own phone vibrated with a text message from Zora. "Someone broke into my locker at school. All my books and notes are gone. Principal says it's probably just a prank." Another form of pressure, another message being sent. When Hamilton finished his call, his expression had shifted to one of genuine concern. "That was the Provost Marshal. Your home was vandalized while you were on base today. Racial slurs spray painted on your garage door. The MPs have secured the scene." Amara absorbed this news with outward calm, though fury and fear battled within her. "Is my daughter safe?" "She's still at school. We've dispatched personnel to ensure she gets home safely." He hesitated. "Colonel, I'm assigning additional security to your family effective immediately. Whatever disagreements exist about how this case should be handled, threats against military families cross a line no one condones." As Amara left headquarters, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Colonel Washington." She answered. "Colonel, this is Sandra Martinez from the FBI Civil Rights Division. We need to meet immediately. We received some information you need to see. The meeting took place at a secure location off base, a nondescript federal building downtown." Martinez, a serious woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair pulled into a tight bun, wasted no time on pleasantries. 3 days ago, we received an anonymous package containing internal Columbus PD emails and memos spanning the last 5 years. She slid a folder across the table. "They reveal a deliberate policy of targeting minority neighborhoods for aggressive enforcement, including explicit instructions to officers about using pretextual stops against Black and Hispanic drivers." Amara reviewed the documents, recognizing Sergeant Holloway's name appearing repeatedly as an enthusiastic implement of these policies. The directives came from command level all the way from the chief's office, though carefully worded to maintain plausible deniability. Martinez leaned forward. "Your incident appears to have spooked someone inside the department with a conscience. They're providing evidence that goes far beyond your case." The implications were staggering. What had begun as a wrongful arrest of one officer had cracked open evidence of systematic Civil rights violations affecting thousands of citizens were preparing subpoenas for the department's complete records. Martinez continued, but there's something else you should know. Officer Mercer has approached us about becoming a cooperating witness. Amara raised an eyebrow. Mercer, Holloway's partner, he's a relatively new officer, claims he's been increasingly uncomfortable with department practices, but feared retaliation if he spoke up. Your case was his breaking point. Back at Fort Benning, Amara found military police vehicles parked outside her home, the racist graffiti already painted over inside. Zora sat with a female MP officer, her expression a mixture of anger and determination. They think they can scare us, she said as Amara entered. They're wrong. That evening, as Amara reviewed case documents at her dining table, her secure phone rang. Colonel, this is General Richardson. The chairman's voice was grave. I've been informed about the escalation of harassment against you and your daughter. Are you secure at present? Yes, sir. Fort Benning has provided excellent security. Good. I've also heard about the pressure regarding your promotion. Board a pause. I want you to know I'm addressing that personally. This case has implications far beyond Columbus or your individual situation. I'm beginning to understand that, sir. The resistance you're encountering indicates you're hitting nerves that need to be hit. Stay the course, Colonel. After the call ended, Amara stepped onto her back porch, needing fresh air to process the day's developments. The full moon illuminated her yard where two MPs stood guard at the perimeter. Her phone chimed with a news alert. Breaking: Fox News to air exclusive interview with Colonel who served with Amara Washington in Afghanistan claims she regularly played race card to advance career. Another assault on her character. Another attempt to discredit her before she could fully expose what was happening in Columbus. The resistance was intensifying, becoming more sophisticated and multi-pronged. Character assassination, threats to her career, physical intimidation. It was a coordinated campaign to silence her, to make the cost of pursuing justice too high to bear. As she contemplated these escalating tactics, her phone rang again. The caller ID displayed unknown, but something compelled her to answer. Colonel Washington, a male voice spoke quietly, tension evident in his tone. This is Officer Mercer. I think we need to talk. The call lasted less than 2 minutes, but its content would irreversibly alter the trajectory of the case. Mercer had evidence, recordings, documents, testimony about not just Holloway, but the entire command structure of the Columbus Police Department. He wanted to meet away from both police and military eyes. He sounded terrified but resolute. As Amara ended the call, she weighed the potential risks against the possible breakthrough. Mercer could be setting a trap, or he could be the key to exposing the full extent of the department's misconduct. Either way, the next steps would be the most dangerous yet in an increasingly volatile situation. The forces arrayed against her were powerful, well-ended, and growing desperate as their control of the narrative slipped away. But Amara Washington had not risen to the rank of colonel by backing down from difficult battles, and this battle, she now understood with perfect clarity, was about much more than her own wrongful arrest. It was about systems of power and how they responded when challenged. It was about whether justice was truly available to all Americans, or merely a privilege for some. It was about whether the uniform she wore represented values that extended beyond the boundaries of military bases. As the moon rose higher over her heavily guarded home, Colonel Amara Washington made her decision. She would meet with Officer Mercer, she would gather his evidence, and she would use it to break open the wall of resistance that had been built to protect those who had abused their authority for far too long. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Columbus had once housed military supplies during World War II. Now it served as neutral ground for a meeting that could alter the course of justice in the city. Colonel Amara Washington arrived in an unmarked car driven by a trusted military intelligence officer. Having taken elaborate precautions to ensure she wasn't followed, she wore civilian clothes. Jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low over her eyes. No uniform, no rank insignia, nothing to identify her as the woman at the center of a growing national controversy. Officer Derek Mercer was already inside, pacing nervously between stacked wooden pallets. He too had dressed to avoid recognition, though his police-issue boots and military-style haircut marked him as law enforcement to the trained eye. He started visibly when Amara entered. "You came alone?" he asked, eyes darting to the door behind her. "I have backup nearby." She replied, carefully maintaining distance, "But this conversation is just between us." As agreed, Mercer nodded, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. "I never wanted any of this. You need to understand that I joined the department to help people, yet you participated in my arrest. I followed procedure. That's what we're trained to do." He couldn't meet her eyes. "Follow orders without question. Back up your partner, no matter what, the thin blue line and all that. And now I know that following orders isn't always right." He reached into his jacket, producing a small digital recorder and a USB drive. "I've been recording Holloway for months, originally for my own protection. He has a habit of throwing junior officers under the bus when things go wrong. But after what happened with you, I started recording everything: command meetings, shift briefings, private conversations in the locker room." Amara approached slowly, examining the devices he placed on a dusty crate between them. "What's on these evidence of systematic racial profiling directed from the top down, explicit instructions to target certain neighborhoods, certain demographics? Holloway talking about how they've covered up excessive force complaints for years. He swallowed hard in conversations about your case, specifically how they're trying to discredit you, intimidate you, pressure the military to shut you down." Amara picked up the USB drive, turning it over in her hand. "Why are you doing this, Officer Mercer? You're risking your career, possibly facing criminal charges yourself." Mercer was silent for a long moment. "My grandfather was military like you. Army, fought in Vietnam. He raised me after my parents died, taught me about honor duty service. When I saw you on the ground that night in uniform," his voice cracked slightly, "I knew he would be ashamed of me, and I've been ashamed every day since he squared his shoulders. I'm not asking for forgiveness or immunity. I'm just trying to do what's right." Finally, over the next hour, Mercer detailed the department's operations, the culture of impunity, and the specific directives that had led to discriminatory policing. He named names, provided dates, outlined the chain of command that had enabled these practices to continue despite community complaints and even internal concerns. "The chief knows everything," Mercer confirmed. "He's careful about what he puts in writing, but these recordings have him explicitly approving Holloway's tactics during closed-door meetings." Amara listened intently, asking precise tactical questions that reflected her military intelligence training. Who else in the department might corroborate this? 3, maybe 4 officers who are uncomfortable but too afraid to speak up. Holloway has connections throughout the department. Anyone who crosses him suddenly finds themselves assigned to the worst shifts, worst districts, or facing trumped-up internal affairs investigations and the city government's involvement. The mayor claims ignorance, but these recordings include the chief discussing how to present crime statistics to make the aggressive tactics look successful during budget meetings. The system is designed to reward this kind of policing while hiding its true nature and impact. As their meeting concluded, Amara secured the evidence in a waterproof, impact-resistant case. "What happens now?" Mercer asked, the reality of his actions clearly settling over him. "You take this information to federal prosecutors immediately." He urged. "The department is destroying records as we speak. They know someone's talking. What about you?" "I'll resign tomorrow, effective immediately. Then go somewhere they can't find me until this breaks open." He hesitated. "They will come after you harder than ever once they realize what you have. Holloway has friends in places you wouldn't expect. Be careful, Colonel." The warning proved preempt. The following morning, as Amara delivered Mercer's evidence to Department of Justice prosecutors, the Columbus Police Department announced a press conference. Chief William Daniels, flanked by the mayor and city attorney, revealed that Officer Derek Mercer had been under internal investigation for evidence tampering and false reporting. Any statements or materials provided by this disgraced officer should be viewed with extreme skepticism. The chief declared his confidence belied by the sweat beading on his forehead under the television lights. The attempted preemptive strike failed spectacularly. By evening, federal agents were executing search warrants at the Columbus Police Department, securing records before they could be destroyed. The chief and 3 deputy chiefs were escorted from the building, their electronics confiscated simultaneously. Sergeant Holloway's home was searched, yielding additional evidence, including private text messages that further confirmed the systematic targeting of minority communities. The coordinated raids made national news, elevating what had begun as one officer's wrongful arrest into a full-blown federal civil rights Investigation. As Amara watched the coverage from her office at Fort Benning, her secure line rang, Colonel Washington, this is Agent Martinez. The operation was successful. We've secured the primary evidence and are processing it now. The confirmation should have brought relief, but Amara sensed something in the agent's tone. There's something else. Yes. During the search, we discovered a file on you that goes well beyond normal background research. They had detailed surveillance of your movements, your daughter, schedule information about your late husband, and Martinez hesitated. They had specific plans to disrupt your promotion ceremony, including a fabricated anonymous tip about terrorist connections, designed to trigger a security lockdown. The implications were chilling. This wasn't just character assassination or intimidation. This was a deliberate conspiracy to destroy her military career using false security threats, a federal crime with serious national security implications. The discovery transformed the case, yet again bringing in counterterrorism units and military intelligence. By nightfall, the governor of Georgia had announced the Columbus Police Department would be placed under state control pending the federal investigation. The police chief and 6 senior officers were suspended without pay. Local news reported that Sergeant Holloway had been taken into federal custody after allegedly attempting to flee the state. The backlash began almost immediately. Police supporters gathered outside the department headquarters, some carrying signs with slogans like "Back the Blue" and "Washington for Prison." Counter-protesters arrived, leading to tense confrontations that required state troopers to establish buffer zones. Social media exploded with competing hashtags #justice for Washington versus #StandWithCPD. What had begun as a wrongful arrest was now dividing the entire community along increasingly volatile lines. At Fort Benning, security had been elevated to its highest level short of active threat conditions. Amara's scheduled appearance at a military ceremony became the target of an actual security concern when intelligence identified a credible threat. The ceremony proceeded with Amara attending via secure video link instead of in person, a precaution that proved wise when a man was arrested attempting to enter the venue with a concealed weapon. Meanwhile, at Columbus High School, Zora Washington faced her own battlefront during lunch period. A group of students whose parents were police officers or supporters confronted her in the cafeteria. "Your mom is destroying this town," one boy shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's ruining good officers' lives for attention." Zora stood her ground, facing the group with the same composure her mother had shown throughout the ordeal. "My mother was thrown to the ground and handcuffed while wearing the uniform of the United States Army. If your parents think that's acceptable, maybe they should reconsider their values." The confrontation didn't become physical, but the lines had been drawn. The school administration, after weeks of failing to address the going tensions, finally arranged a student forum to discuss the impact of the case on the school community. But the damage had been done. Students had divided into factions, mirroring the polarization in the broader community that evening as mother and daughter debriefed their respective days over dinner under the watchful eyes of military security personnel. Amara received a call that crystallized the true stakes of the battle they were fighting. "Colonel Washington, this is General Richardson." The chairman's voice was uncharacteristically solemn. "I've just come from a meeting with the Secretary of Defense and the President. The developments in Columbus have elevated this matter to the highest levels of national security concern. I understand, sir, your promotion board was scheduled for next week. As you know, there have been efforts to delay it. A pause. Those efforts have failed. The board will proceed as scheduled with my personal recommendation for your promotion to Brigadier General." Relief washed through Amara, though she maintained her professional demeanor. "Thank you, sir. There's more. The President has authorized me to inform you that he intends to address the broader issues of military-police relations and civil rights in a national address. Next week, your case will be specifically cited as an example of both the problems and the courage needed to address them." After the call ended, Amara sat in momentary silence, processing the implications. What had begun with a phone call from a police station had escalated beyond anything she could have imagined. The personal costs had been tremendous. Security threats, career uncertainty, her daughter's school experience tainted, her privacy shattered, but the impact was expanding exponentially, potentially leading to reforms that could protect countless others from similar abuses. Later that night, As Amara prepared for bed, Zora knocked on her door. "Mom, can we talk?" They sat together on the edge of the bed, mother and daughter, soldiers in different ways on the same battlefield. "Do you ever regret making that call?" Zora asked quietly. "The one from the police station?" Amara considered the question carefully. "No, I regret that it was necessary. I regret the pain it's caused you, but I don't regret standing up against what was wrong, even knowing how difficult the path would be." Zora nodded. Slowly, "I told my guidance counselor today that I want to apply to West Point next year." She met her mother's surprised gaze. "Someone needs to continue what she started." Amara embraced her daughter, emotions finally breaking through her carefully. Maintained composure. This was why the fight mattered. This was why, despite the resistance and the risks, the battle had to be fought. And won not just for justice in one case, but for the future. Zora and countless others would inherit the system. Was approaching its breaking point, the fault lines exposed by one woman's refusal to accept injustice. What would emerge from that breaking remained to be seen, but Colonel Amara, Washington was determined to ensure it would be something better, stronger, and more just than what had come before. 6 months after Colonel Amara, Washington's wrongful arrest, the federal courthouse in Columbus, Georgia, was filled to capacity. Journalists packed the media section, their cameras focused on the 7 former police officers seated at the defense table. Most prominent among them was former Sergeant James Holloway, his once confident posture now slumped in defeat. As the jury foreman rose to deliver the verdict on the count of conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law, we find the defendant James Holloway guilty. The pronouncement continued through multiple counts. Against each defendant, the word guilty echoing through the courtroom, 23 times in total, as the judge thanked the jury for their service. Amara sat in the gallery, her expression composed, but her eyes reflecting the weight of the moment. Beside her sat Zora, now a high school senior with West Point acceptance letter in hand, and General Marcus Richardson, who had flown in specifically for this day. Outside, hundreds of community members gathered on the courthouse steps, the crowd notably diverse in a city that had been deeply divided. Just months earlier, signs reading "Justice Served" and "Equal Protection Under Law" waved alongside American flags. The case that had begun with one colonel's arrest had expanded to reveal decades of systematic civil rights violations within the Columbus Police Department. The subsequent investigation had uncovered evidence of racial profiling, excessive force, evidence tampering, and retaliatory practices that had victimized thousands of citizens. Former officer Derek Mercer, having received limited immunity for his testimony, had become the key witness for the prosecution, providing insider details that proved impossible to refute. The department itself had been placed under a federal consent decree requiring complete restructuring under Department of Justice supervision. 43 officers had resigned or been terminated. New leadership had been appointed. With a mandate for comprehensive reform, the police chief faced his own trial next month on charges of obstruction of justice and conspiracy, but the impact extended far beyond Columbus. 3 weeks after the verdict, Colonel Amara Washington stood at attention on the parade grounds of Fort Benning as General Richardson pinned the single star of a brigadier general to her uniform. The promotion ceremony, originally scheduled as a standard military formality, had transformed into a nationally televised event symbolizing both institutional accountability and progress. "The star you receive today represents not just your exceptional service record," Richardson said during his address, "but your courage in upholding the highest principles of this uniform. Even when doing so came at great personal cost." As he pinned the star in place, he leaned close to her ear. "You've changed everything," he whispered before stepping back to render a formal salute. The promotion was only the beginning. In Washington, D.C., Congress had passed the Military Personnel Civil Rights Protection Act, colloquially known as the Washington Act, establishing new federal standards for how civilian authorities must treat military personnel. The legislation included specific provisions addressing racial bias and policing, and created new accountability mechanisms for departments nationwide. At the Pentagon, new training protocols were being implemented across all service branches, preparing military personnel to navigate civilian law enforcement encounters while protecting their rights and dignity. The reforms were practical, substantial, and designed to prevent future incidents like the one that had catalyzed them 2 months after her promotion. Brigadier General Washington established the Military Civil Rights Foundation dedicated to supporting service members facing discrimination both within and outside the military. Using her new platform, she began a national speaking tour addressing both military and civilian audiences about systematic change and institutional accountability. Her first book, The Uniform and the Badge: Reconciling Authority and Justice in America, became an instant bestseller and required reading at both police meets and military officer training programs. For Zora, the transformation had been equally profound. The teenager who had watched her mother being handcuffed was now preparing to enter West Point, carrying forward a family legacy of service while embodying its newest chapter. Her application essay describing how witnessing her mother's courage had shaped her understanding of leadership and justice had been singled out by the admissions committee as extraordinary. On a crisp autumn morning 1 year after the arrest, Amara stood before the Columbus Police Department headquarters, which had once been the site of her humiliation. The building now housed not only a reformed police force, but also a new community oversight board with rail authority and a civil rights compliance office staffed by Department of Justice personnel. As she approached the entrance for a scheduled meeting with the new chief, a familiar figure exited the building. Former Sergeant James Holloway, now serving 5 years in federal prison, had been temporarily released to provide testimony in related cases. Escorted by U.S. Marshals, he stopped short upon seeing Amara in her full dress uniform, the Brigadier General's star gleaming on her shoulder. Their eyes met briefly, hers steady, his unable to maintain contact. Without a word, he was led to a waiting vehicle. Amara watched him go, feeling neither triumph nor animosity, only a quiet acknowledgement that systems could change when brave individuals refused to accept injustice as inevitable. Inside, she was greeted with respect by officers of the Reform Department, many newly hired as part of the consent decree's diversity requirements. The new chief, an experienced black woman recruited from the Philadelphia Police Department, had specifically requested Amara's input on community relations strategies. After the meeting, Amara met with former officer Derek Mercer, whose testimony had been crucial to the case. After a period of protected witness status, he had reemerged as an advocate for police reform, working directly with Amara's foundation to develop ethical policing programs. "I never thought I'd be doing this," he admitted as they walked through the station. "When I joined the force, I just wanted to keep my head down and follow orders. And now I understand that real courage sometimes means breaking ranks to do what's right." He gestured to a training room where new recruits were attending a civil rights compliance session. "These officers will start their careers with different expectations, different training that matters later." That week, Amara delivered the commencement address at Columbus State University's Criminal Justice Program, speaking to the next generation of law enforcement professionals about the delicate balance between authority and accountability. The badge and the uniform both represent service, she told the graduates, but service requires constant vigilance against the corruption of power and the courage to stand firm when systems fail. As she concluded her speech, she noticed Sora in the audience recording the address on her phone. Her daughter had become her most dedicated chronicler, documenting each step of what had become known nationally as the Washington transformation, not just of one police department, but of the relationship between military and civilian authority, between law enforcement and the communities they served. The final piece of the transformation came full circle on the 1-year anniversary of the arrest. Amara and Zora stood together at the exact spot where she had been handcuffed, now marked by a small memorial plaque commemorating the case. The neighborhood that had witnessed her humiliation had become the site of reconciliation as community members gathered for the unveiling ceremony. "This plaque does not mark a victory of one side over another," Amara said to the assembled crowd. "It marks a commitment to ensuring that the uniform of military service and the badge of law enforcement both stand for the same principles: justice, equality, and respect for the dignity of all people." As the ceremony concluded, Amara's phone chimed with a message from General Richardson: "Nomination packet for Army Vice Chief of Staff submitted today. First black woman in history. Board convenes next month." The transformation continues. Looking up from her phone, Amara met Zora's eyes across the gathering. The journey that had begun with handcuffs and humiliation had led to historic change, but Its true legacy would be carried forward by the next generation, by Zora and countless others, inspired to continue the work of transforming systems from within. The power of that single phone call from a police station had indeed proven that true. Power doesn't shout, it transforms. What do you think about the impact one person can have on changing broken systems? Has Colonel Washington's story inspired you to stand up against injustice in your own community? Comment below with a time when you witnessed someone turn a personal injustice into positive change. Like this video if you believe in the power of principled leadership. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage in the face of discrimination, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that systems can change when brave individuals refuse to accept the status quo. Thank you for joining us for this powerful story of transformation, and remember, true power doesn't shout, it transforms. Colonel Amara Washington's story teaches us that true power lies not in authority or position, but in principled action and moral courage when faced with racial discrimination. She didn't simply seek personal vindication, but understood that her experience represented a systemic problem affecting countless others. Without her resources, the transformation she initiated demonstrates how individual courage can catalyze institutional change when someone refuses to accept injustice as inevitable. Her story illustrates that meaningful reform requires evidence, strategy, and resilience. In the face of powerful resistance, those who benefit from broken systems will deploy sophisticated tactics to maintain the status quo, from character assassination to intimidation. The path to justice is rarely easy or without personal cost. We learn that uniforms and badges represent not just power but responsibility. Both military and law enforcement exist to serve communities, and this service requires constant vigilance against the corruption of authority. When systems fail, individuals of conscience must stand firm. Perhaps most importantly, Washington's journey reveals that change happens not through shouting or destruction, but through strategic transformation from within. By working through legitimate channels while refusing to be silenced, she created lasting reforms that will protect future generations. The ultimate lesson is that no system is beyond reform when brave individuals are willing to use their position, privilege, and voice to challenge injustice with unwavering commitment to truth. What would you have done if you were in Colonel Washington's position? Has there been a time when you witnessed discrimination and had to decide whether to speak up or stay silent? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story moved you, please like this video to help others find it, and subscribe for more powerful stories about individuals who transform injustice into positive change. Have you ever seen someone use their position to stand up for others who couldn't stand up for themselves? Tell us about your heroes in the comments, and if you know someone who needs inspiration to confront injustice in their own life, share this video with them today. Thank you for watching this story of courage, dignity, and transformation. Remember that each of us has the power to create change when we refuse to accept the unacceptable.